Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature. Whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes, nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
Welcome, guys, to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host, Tony Evans, taking you through that wonderful world of heavy rock, punk and heavy metal and all those wonderful things that we love to listen to. Firstly, I just want to say thank you very much for your response from last week's episode, not the bonus episode that's just gone out, but the one before from Venom's in Wastelands album. Really thank you. It was a really great response, particularly on YouTube. Thank you, those that came and gave us some lovely feedback and sort of just piled in another good listen. It's just really nice every now and again to get some positive feedback. I don't get negative feedback, but you know what I mean. Like, it's just nice to get some validation that someone's listening and they're enjoying it. Numbers are numbers, but interaction is more important. Anyway, this week's episode it came to me like a lot of things do in the darkness of the night, in the long dark tea time of the soul, as they say. Lying there, couldn't sleep, and I didn't want to put on something really, really heavy because I thought, well, that'll just make it worse. So I decided to listen to some of my new wave albums, and I thought, okay, I love XTC. Let's have a listen to XTC. And I've told this before on the program. It's they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And in the journey of my musical appreciation, they sort of come in my teens, if you know what I mean. I come across them when I was about 15, 16, sort of around that time. I bought Drums and Wires, I think it was, secondhand, and I absolutely fell in love with it because we all knew the singles. Those that listen to this sort of music would know the singles that are big for the band, like Making Plans for Nigel, Sergeant Rock, Towers of London, all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk about later on. But pardon me, excuse me. when I plugged in Black Sea, which is the album I'm going to talk about now today, I'd already been I think subconsciously I'd been collecting the reissues. Landspeed Records here in Canberra, the home of all good records. If you're going to buy something, go to Landspeed if you're in Canberra. Brilliant. Or online, you can get the stuff online. Lots of international releases. Little plug over, but yeah, they're the geezers. They're really good people. They managed to get in the Stephen Wilson 200 gram vinyl reissues recently, and I'm sort of getting them slowly. I picked up Black Sea, Drums and Wires. I'm getting next week the reissue, and the week before that I picked up I think it was Mama's, or is it? Yeah. Anyway, one of those ones, and it's just the reason I thought I'd bring up in this episode is because I am a secret drummer, if you know what I mean. I've been playing bass for 30 plus years, more, actually 34 plus years, I should say. But I hadn't, and I always wanted to play the drums. Drums are one of my favourite instruments, as you might know, but I talk about them on the show quite expansively. And Black Sea, or the album before Black Sea, Drums and Wires, which came out in 1979 on Virgin Records, was produced by Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham. Now, they're very big names in the music industry in the UK and worldwide, in fact. But they developed this drum sound slightly prior to this album, Drums and Wires, the previous album, 79, with Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, this sort of gated drum effect. But if you know what a gated drum effect is basically it's looping the drum, if I am correct. It's, you know, that sort of, you remember that, if you remember the drums in the Phil Collins song, Something in the Air, or whatever it is, you know, that doom, 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 that sort of like very echoey, reverby kind of drum sound that sounds almost electronic but is not. Well, that's a gated drum effect. And I really described that poorly. So any musos out there shaking their heads at me, I had to apologise. But these two producers who had worked with like Stevie Lillywhite, I mean he's an OBE now. Big Country, Susie and the Banshees, Simple Minds, Psychedelic Furs, Toyah, Talking Heads, Peter Gabriel, and Hugh, you know, Yes, Peter Gabriel, Split Enz, McCartney, The Police, ELP, amazing pedigree there. So the reason, again, I'll get back to the drum, is that I lay there listening to this, and I'd forgotten, because I read Chalk Hills to Children, which is the XTC biography, years ago, and I'd forgotten how innovative the band was with their drum sound. Now, you might say, what's that got to do with heavy metal tone? Well, you do know that this show, by now, does not just focus on one thing. I do like to occasionally talk about prog. I do like to talk about punk and post-punk, and XTC are the greatest example of that. Now, they invented a sound with drums and wires where the guitar, which was the wires, and the drums were focused mainly in the album. Very avant-garde, they're very poppy in that album. You know, they come back a bit with Black Sea, but they really push the drum sound heavily forward. And Terry Chambers on the drums, one of the most underrated drummers in the history of music, in my opinion, an extremely gifted drummer. Him and Colin Moulding on bass, who's also one of my heroes, mind you, one of the best songwriters in the business. Them two together, they've made this almost, if you listen to it on a good stereo, or even so the 200-gram remaster by Stephen Wilson, you can hear the separation. It's almost like the drums are in front of you and the band is behind the drum kit in the record. And that was very innovative at the time, because, or innovative, whatever you want, how you want to say it, because up until then, yes, heavy bands had played a lot of big sound, Bonham and you know, Ward and all those guys, you know, Moon. They were big sounds, but they were not mixed in the same way as they were from drums and wires. And that's what I believe, and I think that is sort of universal knowledge in the music industry. So it sort of changed the way that drums were mixed into music. And so I went then on a bit of a musical journey to have a listen to just bands like, you know, classic bands like Maiden and later Deep Purple, and heavy metal bands that maybe were recorded after 79, 80. So later metal bands. And lo and behold, not just that, but bands like Talking Heads and Blondie, later Blondie, and you know, I mean, even, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I didn't deliberately set out to listen to it, but there was a Bon Jovi track playing in the shopping centre when I was walking around yesterday, and bingo bango, there were the drums up the front. Now, would they have done that before? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that this band here were so innovative in that respect that they pushed that sound forward. Interestingly, as a band, they never stood still. They started off as a punk band inadvertently a punk band in '77 because they're in Swindon, and which is a sort of rural town of the UK, and there's not much of a music scene. They're in a band called the Helium Boys, Helium Kids, and they're playing sort of a like a T-Rex kind of sound. Punk comes along, and the media and and fans gobbled up anything that sounded remotely different to ordinary, and I'm doing this with speech marks, pop music at the time. And so Andy Partridge, the lead singer and guitarist, had a very unusual voice and a very unusual way of enunciating his lyric and punctuating his songs. He even said later on that he did that deliberately to sort of break more of the punk, because it was making money. Why wouldn't you, right? It was, got them in the industry, which they probably would have been unnoticed up until that point, which is a real criminal shame, right? So thank you, punk, for that. They were always known to go changing, right? So first two albums, were very punky. Go to the second album was quite punky, quite poppy. Then you had Drums and Wires, which is really quite poppy because you had songs on it, Making Plans for Nigel and things like that on it, with this new innovative gated drum sound. Colin Moulding once said that Terry Chambers hit the drums so hard in a recording studio you could barely be in the same room as him, which is an amazing thing to think about, and still have precision and timing. And then they make this album, Black Sea. Now, originally it was titled, it was called something else. It was called, let me write it down, Working Under Pressure. Because up to that point, XTC had been touring rigorously, as people did back then. 6 gigs a week for 2 months solid. There was a point there where Andy, who already had extremely terrible stage fright, he was not a natural stage performer. Not everyone is, not everyone, just because you play an instrument means you want to be on stage, right? He had anxiety and he had exhaustion, and he forgot the lyrics to the song. He forgot his own name, and he didn't know where he was. And that's quite a sort of terrifying thought, isn't it? Right. And so when they went into the studio to record this is one of their last albums that they actually toured with, because he'd had enough. Him and the band were arguing. Dave Gregory had come in replace of the keyboard player from the previous album. Dave Gregory is a guitarist, second guitarist, a very, very gifted guitarist, one of my favourites, in fact. If you ever get a chance to watch, there's a YouTube thing about, and it's like guitar tech videos, and he talks about his guitar tech and his amps and his guitars and what he used and how he played them, and it's really fascinating that his he's got a really rare Fender or Gibson that he plays. And so they brought them in, and what Andy wanted, unlike Drums and Wires, because he couldn't really tour Drums and Wires as accurately as they'd like to, because Andy has this thing about the audience should hear how the record is played. He wanted to play it live like it's recorded, and I have a lot of respect for that. Maiden did it, have done it and still do it to some extent, but these guys just wanted to be, didn't want to get there and have, and I'm going to use the word hysteria, right? I'm going to put that in brackets. The over excess of the albums like Hysteria, which I know is held in high regard by a lot of people, but I just find it an awful album. It's so overproduced. It's so up its own sphincter sometimes. It just doesn't do it for me. I know, look, a lot of people, my wife loves it, my daughters love it, people love it. I prefer not to say that I do, because I'm not going to tell a lie and say I do, because I really don't. I like all the albums up until that. I even like Pyromania. After Pyromania, Def Leppard went down. I've already mentioned that before in a previous episode, so let's not go on to that one. It caused a lot of, so they wanted to record without any overdubs and all that sort of stuff. But also at the time in the band, there was some issues going on, because Colin was writing the singles. All the singles that made big hits for the band Colin had written. And Virgin loved him for that. Virgin Records that wanted him to write more. And he was getting a bit sort of frustrated about it because he always considered his band, which, you know, to some extent it is, but you know, it's, you know, it doesn't not every band is a band of brothers, right? And so he got a bit dictatorial. Gregory and David and him, you know, they had to try and get their guitars into a mix. So because David was a much more technical guitarist and Andy was a much more rhythm style guitarist, they sort of basically just dropped into different holes in the album where there was space for each of them to play. It was called Black Sea afterwards because of Andy's emotional darkness. And so it is an album that straddles, I'm going to say this, it straddles really several, for me, several genres. It's a pop album, it's a punk album, it's an alternative pop album, and it's even a hard rock metal album to some extent in one of the tracks, which we'll get to. It was a tough time for the band. They split up to do separate things while the album was being produced. David went off to record with Peter Gabriel on Melt, and Colin and Terry formed a band called the Colonel, which they made released a few singles with in 1980, and one of their songs was in the movie Times Square, which I've never seen, but I might hunt it out. What Andy wanted to do on his album was get to take drums and wires and push it to its ultimate limits, which I think they did. Now, there's one track on this album. There's a lot of controversial tracks on this album for the time. Not controversial now, they were then, and it shows you the morality of people, how they are then as they are now. But there's one track on it is one of the heaviest tracks. I mean, it was because I was listening to it at 3 a.m. You know, I'm lying there, and it came on. I forgot about this particular track. You know, I was in sort of a bit somnambulistic. You know, like, and there's a track called the Somnambulist on this track on the album. But I was a little bit in that not awake, not asleep time, and it really it got me. It woke me up, and I couldn't. I had to listen to it a couple of times, which is, I'd forgotten how unbelievably textured and heavy this particular song is. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get to the side, when we talk about track for track. It's an album that you can get now on all streaming platforms. The one you get on the streaming platforms is the 1990 something reissue. Remaster, but this one that I've got is the 2019 Stephen Wilson remaster, which is a slightly different sounding album. So I'm going to talk about the one you can easily listen to, which is the one that's on the streaming platform. I won't necessarily go into the nuances of the for Stephen Wilson reissue unless you can get your hands on it, because it's I couldn't find it on streaming platforms, so you might find on YouTube, but it won't be the same because the bitrate won't be the same, will it? Anyway, let's move on to... Oh no, well, I haven't told you about how it was recorded. It was recorded at the Townhouse in Shepherd's Bush on the Goldhawk Road. That's where my friend used to work. A friend of mine's brother used to work there as a producer. He wrote the soundtrack for Howling 3, and he said to me, "Please don't hold that against me," and I don't hold it against him. And it was recorded in the famous Stone Room. It's not there anymore. It's now Flats, which I think again is another kick in the nuts for us music lovers. You know, we can go to people's birthplaces, we can go to famous castles, and we can go to sporting arenas, but we can't go to places where what we love was produced. Just the way as the Marquis disappeared and the Astoria in London. Same with the Townhouse. And the Stone Room had this amazing reverberation sound to it. And my mate used to tell me it was an amazing room to record in. And I would love to have to have gone there and seen it. And I think there's a missing thing there. I think music people would go on tours to see those sort of things. They would go. You can go to Abbey Road. Well, you're going to go to Abbey Road because, of course, you are, because the Beatles recorded there, and the Pistols and Queen, and they're gonna be there, aren't they? Because it's Abbey Road. Why wouldn't you're not going to get rid of a piece of Beatles history, but history that belongs to us, the lovers of the slightly more darker, more obscure love of music. It's gone because it means nothing to people, because it's ephemera. Let's just put a building on it. It really frustrates me. It really genuinely does. It's one of those things I feel very passionate about. Anyway, rant over. I'm going to go and fill my cup up again, and I will see you on the other side, where we will quickly chat track for track on this amazing album, okay, and go through some of its lyrical nuances. But there's one track on that I really, there's actually two, to be honest, but one I really want you to listen to. Even if you don't listen to the whole album and you don't really enjoy the sound, this particular track I want you to please have a listen to. Anyway, enough for me. Talk to you on the other side, guys. Bye for now.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back to part 2 of this dive into XTC's Black Sea, the 4th album that came out on the 12th of September 1980 on Virgin Records. Now, as I said, if you've stuck this far and you want to hear about track by track, good, I'm glad you're with us. I do know that my listening base sometimes will kick out before the second half, and that's fine. Each into your own. You might like to skip to the second part and just listen to the album track by track. Some people do that as well. Anyway, we open the first side, with Respectable Street. Okay, now I've got the vinyl in front of me because I'm going to talk to you about that. So, Respectable Street. This one was banned, which is really interesting to think now, these days, that you would ban music, okay? Because, one second, I'm just going to... Sorry about that. I just got sidetracked for a second. So it was banned by the BBC. Now, I'm not saying it happens anymore. I mean, I watched a great comedy sketch the other day with someone talking about how they wanted to ban a Christmas song because it was, the Wokarati get hold of it. But the number one single at that particular time when they banned it was "Smack Your Bitch Up." So, Anyway, the reason it was banned, like a lot of things back then, was the lyrical content. So they mention abortions in this, in the lyric. Okay, it's basically about living in a posh area and how gated communities, and how you react to, and people spying through curtains. Okay. Because they live on Respectable Street. They talk about abortions in cosmopolitan proportions to their daughters as they speak of contraception and immaculate receptions on their portable, and this is another thing, they say, the lyric goes, on their portable Sony entertainment centres. Sony wanted to take them to court for using the word Sony in their song, which is, again, another absolute madness. And that shows you the power of music back in 1980. People wouldn't care now. They slather at the thought that their product was being named in a song. It was also because the song was banned. Radio play was banned. It's the reason why they also didn't want the name attached to it. there's great lyrics like, and it says here, now she speaks about diseases and which sex position pleases her old man. Avon lady fills the creases when she manages to squeeze in past the caravans that never move from their front gardens. It's a beautiful the way that both Colin and Andy write lyrics is so pictorial. You can picture, particularly where I come from. I lived in a poor part of London, but I do remember posh parts. I used to go to, visit uncles and aunts that had posh caravans out the front. Like I said, never on their driveways. It was like a point of pride, and they had beautifully manicured lawns and double glazing. Sunday church and they look fetching. Saturday night saw him retching over our fence. Bang the wall for me to turn down. I see them with their stern frown as they dispense that kind of look. So basically it's someone who's a bit rough living in a posh area, and the neighbours are twitching their curtains and having a look. And musically it's fun. It's got a really... See, the thing about XTC is they're very heavily influenced by the Beatles and by 60s pop and by avant-garde music, all sorts of different things. And so the thing about 60s pop, like the Beatles and the Beach Boys and the Kinks and the Stones, and they were really well produced, well made, and very thought out pieces of music. They weren't a throwaway item that pop might suggest. And this is the same with Respectable Street. So musically, it's really engaging. Now, let me just have a quick look here. Respectable Street was the fourth single that came out in March 1981. There were 4 singles off the album, which is so rare nowadays, right? Generals and Majors in August, Towers of London in October, and Sergeant Rock is going to help me in December, and then the following year, March, was Respectable Street. Now, as I said, it's a really good single. I have all of the singles they've ever released. I've got all of the albums, even their side shoot albums and their offshoot records. I am a big fan, as I said. I truly believe that they are the greatest pop band, and that's a really not a disparaging term to come out of the UK outside of the Beatles. Really mean that, because they make genuinely good music. For those musos out there listening to this show, you're going to love it. For those are more into the heavy, bash your head against the wall kind of music, you're not going to like it. But might open your ears, you might enjoy it, or open your mind to something different. It is an absolutely incredible band. That they go through phases that you might like. But I love every single phase they've been through. Anyway, Respectable Street, what a cracking way to open it. Beautiful lyric, great pop song, brilliant. Didn't do well on the charts. In fact, none of the off this album did well on the charts. It didn't do as well as it did well in America and in Canada and Australia. It did very well. In its native country, XTC really did not do that well. They were not. If you have to understand, there was a lot of noise in 1980. England was the place to be musically. There was a lot of noise, and to get heard through that noise was quite difficult. A lot of hard work, hence the 6-day touring. But doesn't matter. Still a brilliant single that got banned by the BBC. So hey, it just made it. Sometimes that was a bonus. Pistols will tell you that. And here is very obvious. The drum sound I talked about in the first half and the guitar sound. It's really forward. The bass parts are fluid. Colin's bass parts are nothing like traditional. If anything, they're very Chris Squire-y. They're very Yes-like. They're very fluid. They're definitely obvious, and they're there. They're not just holding up the rhythm section and one octave below, bouncing along like a lot of pop tends to be later on anyway. It has a very psychedelic first sound to it, in fact, actually. So then we move on to Generals and Majors, another single, okay? And this one is a real sing-along, light kind of song, okay? It's not by any means as hard hitting and dark as Respectable Street. This is a sort of a light lift. I would say this is probably a Colin Moulding song, if anything, because it's not as dark as Andy was at this period. But it's got a nice sing-along, like the chorus is generals and majors, aha, they're never too far from battlefield so glorious, out in a world of their own, they'll never come till once again victorious. It's such a great sing-along lyric, calling generals and majors everywhere, calling generals and majors, your World War III is drawing near. So it is dark, because in the 80s we did have that threat of nuclear war. We were, you had the Brezhnevs and the Reagans and the Thatchers and all that of the world, sort of wanting to be the next superpower. We were 40 years away from the previous war, and they wanted more. I think it was just a very dark place in the early 80s. Unemployment, racism, all sorts of isms were flying around. And this, in a pop kind of song, they do make some statement. It's just a nice sing-along. It repeats itself quite rapidly. It's nothing out, hard to listen to. It made a good single. And again, it has that kind of really sort of stark alt pop sound, that rigid rhythmic notation. It plays in time signatures that are completely not atypical for a major audience. And this was the beauty of the 80s. Thank goodness, I put my hands together and I pray to the sky and say, thank you, punk. Because it took us away into places that we would never have had the opportunity to. Those that have listened to Susie and the Banshees' Scream, which I mentioned before, who was produced by Steve Lillywhite, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Very atonal, almost unlistenable in some areas. And you might say to me, Tony, what do you mean unlistenable? Why am I listening to an album that's unlistenable? What I mean by that is that, like anything, like all new major art forms, it's extreme in its first, and then it leaches and softens, yeah? Like, so dare I say COVID, like dare I say anything, it starts off hardcore and then it weakens and softens and mutates, and then you get this part mutation of the music, and it's just glorious, okay? Absolutely glorious. And I know it's not heavy metal, but this is my show and I want to talk about it, and I fucking love it, okay? And I'm going through a tough time at the moment, as I've told you before, in life, so I want things to make me smile, and this one does. The song itself, or the songs in this album, have been called polychromatic and often off-kilter angular, and I think that's brilliant way of describing this particular album and the songs within it. It's not a big long album by any means. It doesn't hang around. It's quite sorry, I'm turning my page. It's quite jaunty, if that's what you want to use the word. And then we get Living Through Another Cuba. Now this one is, I used to not like this song. This was on the album I'd sort of get to and go, and I would not skip through it, but I'd doing something and my mind would go somewhere else. And then the other morning, as I said, 3 a.m, lying there in the gloom, and this was playing in my headphones, and I thought, wow, what an absolutely brilliant piece of music. The way that the lyric is sung, okay, but also its content. I think about 1980, as I said, Reagan and Thatcher and Brezhnev and all these people, and suddenly I'm thinking Cuba, yeah, because Andy and the boys are of an age that they would have lived through the Cuba Missile Crisis, and where we were the closest to nuclear wars that we've ever been. And this is, I think, their response to that, and to the missiles being put into England from America at Greenham Common. And that's another whole different subject, but the Greenham Common thing, where all the ladies went there, all the CND protesters, and it's a great lyric, and the way that he spits out "living through another Cuba," it's just beautifully pinned to the rhythmic line of the song, right? It's 1961 again, and we're Piggy in the middle. Yes, we were, weren't we? The English, because we were between the Cubans and the Americans and the Russians. While war is polishing his drum and peace plays second fiddle, living through another Cuba, Russia and America are each other's throats, but don't you cry, living through another Cuba. Get on your knees and pray while you're down there, kiss your ass goodbye. God, it's such a brilliant lyric. We're the bulldog on the fence. We're the bulldog on the fence while the others play their tennis overhead. Oh God, it's hardly lovable, and somebody might wind up red or dead, living through another Cuba. Pour some oil on the waters quick. It doesn't matter where from, living from another Cuba. He loves me not. He's pulling fins from an atom bomb. Oh, it is brilliant. There are few musical geniuses in this world, truly musical geniuses in this world. The word gets bandied around a lot, but Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding are definitely the McCartney and Lennon of the 70s into the 90s. Absolutely, definitely. There was an era, wasn't there? And I've told us before, of songwriters in the 70s and early 80s that we'll never see the likes again. Elvis Costello, John Lydon, Andrew Partridge and Colin Moulding, Billy Bragg, Pete Shelley and these people, like, you're just not going to see them. Paul Weller, they aren't going to be around again, because I don't think the written lyric is as important now as it was then, and it really matters to me, being a man of words, and it makes a big difference. And when you attach it to brilliant staccato kind of jagged interactions like this song on this track, it really makes you smile. And I listen to this song now, and it's now possibly one of my favourites on the album. Strange enough, it's funny how you see different songs in different lights every time. And then we come on to Love at First Sight. This is, when I talk about angular, this is extremely angular song. It's very stabby, like, in its music. You can really hear Colin's West Country, or not West Country, sorry, his country style twang in his voice, which he comes out really strongly later on when he feels more free to be himself in songs like Peter Pumpkinhead and Grass and Dear God and things like that later on in their production, in their albums. But Love at First Sight, it's got a really lovely, again, they have really hooky music. See the lovers all gone crazy, looking for romance, it seems. Many sleepless nights will follow, some may lose, but some succeed. Love at first sight. And then you hear this sort of quirky, almost robotic vocal that goes, what they want is, hey, ooh, love. It's a real pretty song. It's a real soft song, whilst you've opened up with two rather heavy songs. Make a plan of lust intention, only just one thing in mind. Make a sip, could be forever, wedding bells, the shotgun kind. I love it. It's talking of premarital sex and the outcome of that if you're not careful enough. And this song, I mean, it's going to sound really, really wanky, guys, but it really is my wife and I. It was love at first sight for me. I know it sounds, does he? But it really was. There are some negatives in this song, of course, but if I look at the negatives, I don't see that. I just feel positive out of the main lyric. and it is beautiful, and it's sharp, and it's quick, and it really does take into consideration that time in the 80s when people just did do what they wanted to do, and pardon my French, fuck the consequences, you know. Beautiful song, really edgy, very drum driven, very angular, very 80s, and this is where that drum sound I was talking about before is leaching in, a gated drum sound that's coming from Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham, all right, who they then also say that Andy helped create that sound and push it even further. So then we move on to Rocket from a Bottle. This one is that sort of, it suffers slightly from that middle album kind of track. It's a song that is about, it definitely is a song of imagery and of allegory. Allegory is not something you have if you're allergic to peanuts, right? Quick, give him a hypopen. He's allegory. It basically is about reaching the skies with your thoughts and ambitions. Okay, using the rocket from a bottle. If you didn't grow up in the UK, you might not know this. The Americans might know about it, but in the UK during fireworks night on the 5th of November, we would often put rockets in milk bottles and fire them out of milk bottles because they would fly out much easier. I do remember one year we set the neighbour's roof alight with a screaming rocket. That's a different story for another night, but yes, okay. So it's using that kind of allegory, like he says here, birds beware, expect me up there. Me and air are feeling light today. Jets should hide, I'll fly alongside. Me and pride are bolted right today. I've been set off by a pretty little girl. I'm like a rocket from a bottle set free. So, you know, again, it's a love story kind of thing. He's been set into the air of love, and he's up in amongst imagination, and the air's so high. And again, it's a really nice piece of music. It's a jaunty music. I think this suffers a little bit from middle albums. Like I said, it loses its way somewhere in the middle. But if you actually take to look at the lyric and then marry it to the rhythmic sections, like Colin Moulding's bass part in this song is just something of beauty, and Terry Chambers just, again, like, it's just the tightest, and Dave Gregory's solo. No, he doesn't do lots of technical solos. They never liked, and I'm using quotes here, solos as a band, but they do like to have a bit of technical nuance in the songs, and it's just got that little edge in there, which I do quite like. I've been shooting off sparks, I'm feeling in love, hate to step back, my smile might just crack, can't stop dreams from going wide today. Hills look sharp, angles play your harp, I feel strong like the tide today. So it's just a positive song, right, about love and first love and so on. And it's got a lovely, lovely ending. The rocket from rocket from it's got a really nice ending. It just takes you out softly to the end, right? And then we move on to No Language in Our Lungs. Oh man, you know, this comes at the end of side 1 if you have the vinyl, and it's a mysterious track. This one is one of Andy's favorites, one of my favorites on the album. Remember I said there are tracks that get quite heavy. This one gets there. It gets there heavy rhythmically, it gets there heavy lyrically, and it gets there heavy feeling wise. By no means is it like heavy metal. It's not AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, whatever you name it. It is heavy in its feel. It's just beautiful. I could buy a book of their lyrics and read them like short stories. There is no language in our lungs to tell the world just how we feel. No bridge of thought, no mental link, no letting out just what you think. There's no language in our lungs. There's no muscle on our tongues to tell the world what's in our hearts. No, we're leaving nothing behind, just chiseled stones. No chance to speak before we're bones. There's no muscle in our tongues. Tongues. So isn't that lovely imagery? There's no air in our lungs to release the words that we need to say, and no strength in our mouth or tongues to relate them. That could be positive, could be negative, right? But it's still heavy. I could slay any problem that would stand in my way. I felt just like a crusader, Lionheart at Holy Land Invader. Nobody can say what they really mean to say. The impotence of speech came up and hit me that day, and I would have made this an instrumental, but the words got in the way. People, listeners, honestly, genuinely, it just gives me goosebumps. And the way that the chorus, No Language in Our Lungs, is sung, it's really modern but ancient, and dark but light. It's just fabulous. I can't really say much more about that, to be honest with you, that how wonderful that is. But one of my favourite songs in the album, and I often will go back to that one now and just re-listen to it. And then we get, and on the, now this is where the two albums, the reissue and the original version, the three versions of the album differ. The single Towers of London. I like the 1999 reissue version. I love the 2019 Stephen Wilson one. I also love the single that came out because there's several versions of it. It's basically about the building of London, the canals and the trains and the drains by the navvies, the Irish navigators, the hard-working men that would live on, 12 pints of lager a bitter a day because they couldn't drink the water, and how they would work without like that was beyond me. But it's a beautiful single. It's a great single. Actually, probably one of my favourite singles of theirs. It's very, again, dun 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 dun. It's got a really good, how do I say it? It's very, very well augmented. Okay, it's got brilliant augmentation on it. Augmentation? Is that the wrong word? Anyway, you know what I mean. Augmentation, I don't know if that's to do with boobs. You know what I mean. It's just well produced and well made and well put together. And it's got a great lyric in it. Towers of London, when they had built you, did they watch over the men who fell? Because a lot of people died making these monumental structures. Towers of London, when they had built you, Victoria's gem found in somebody's hell. Pavements of gold leading to the underground stations. Grenadier guardsmen walking pretty ladies around. Fog is the sweat of the never navvies who pound the spikes in the rails to their very own heaven. I'm just wish I could write like that. Oh, and then the chorus is beautiful. Towers of London, when they had built you. It's just really a great pop song, but also quite a stark story about the people. We walk around the streets of London, those that live there who have been there, or any major city, and you don't think about the people who would have worked and died putting the drains in, so your houses don't smell of shit, and so you don't get cholera and typhus, and the train that makes it convenient for you to get from A to B, and the roads that are flat so the cars don't, are smooth for your journey, all that kind of stuff, right? The gas pipes that were laid so you could have light and heat. There's another great lyric here. Merchant from Stepney, walking pretty ladies by, rain in the tears of the never navvies who cry, who for the bridge that doesn't go in the direction of Dublin. So what that means is that, I butchered that lyric, I do apologise, I'll say it again. Walking pretty ladies by, the rain is the tears of the never navvies who cry for the bridge that doesn't go in the direction of Dublin, because they want to go back home. They're making bridges like the Tower Bridges and London Bridge, but they're not going home, right? And it's a lovely idea, isn't it? The sweat from the guardsmen is the fog, the blood, the rain is the tears. Beautiful, and it is And it's got this lovely little ending. It says, I've seen it in the painting, I've seen it in engravings, I've seen it in their faces, clear as children's chalk lines on the paving. That's why that book is called Chalk Lines to Children. That's their biography. And a lovely ending, sing-along ending, which the Beatles used to do, and I think they do so well. And honestly, one of my favourites on there. It's a brilliant single. Another little light motif into what is going to come. And Paper and Iron, with brackets, notes and coins. This one is a bit of an enigma to me, because it's quite a sparse musical landscape. It's very 1980s. It's very new wave and very different to what was out there at the time. The lyric is, paper and iron won't buy Eden, working for paper and iron, working for the right to keep my tie on, working for the paper and iron. It's basically money and coins, right? It's just about the 1980s greed and excessive filofaxes and, you know, liquid lunches and all that kind of thing. I pray the kids aren't starving, no chicken for the Sunday carving. I'll stay for one more farthing. I take home my notes and coins every week. I'm told I'm worth much more, but the church says turn the other cheek. The other cheek, paper and iron, won't buy Eden. I know the family needs me, can't moan, the factory feeds me. Won't bite the hand that bleeds me, I take home the notes and iron. Oh, God, again, you know, like the but the church says to remain this meek, remain this meek. So he's this man / woman is a dutiful Christian soul, that's working in a factory, you know, for peanuts, making fat cats rich, just about put that Sunday roast on the table for that one day of rest that they get. And the music sort of belies the lyric, but weirdly it sort of doesn't. It's almost like a lovely contradiction. If you listen to the lyric and listen to the music, it almost seems like they don't marry together, but they do come together beautifully. And then we're going to move on to Burning with Optimism's Flames. So, this one is a really jaunty attack, and it has this real sort of, like the previous song, where it's sort of different to the lyric, to the music. This one's really sort of jumps in, starts to be really roots to them. It sounds like a really sort of a punky, jaunty track with this sort of reggae style underbeat, which does, to some extent, like the dub stuff, which was big in the early 80s, does fly under this album quite a lot. Terry's drumming on here is particularly mixed forward. It's a good example of the gated sound that I was talking about before. It doesn't hang around, okay? It attacks you straight away. It's fast, it's fun. But again, it also is dark. I mean, this whole album is coming from a breakdown by Andy Partridge, really, and boys. It's got this great lyric: never seen her glowing, all that sprite she is throwing, like some aura, from the head it's growing, reaching to the ground, all around like a Navajo blanket. Never heard her singing, now she's getting gently ringing like a copper wind chimes. What on earth is bringing up this stream? The cat who got the cream is licking her lips. And smiling like her Cheshire cousin, she claims she's found a way to make her own light. And all you do is smile, you banish the night. She says she's burning with optimism's flame away, away. She says she's burning up all her guitars and shames away, away. She says she's burning with optimism's flames. It's basically it's a song about the forward thinking, the young youth who go, I feel really positive. And this music, even though it's a dark album, this song, and does have some dark nuances in it, like this here. I can't stop this grinning, so assume me I'm winning. Through pessimism in the air, it's spinning, crashing to the floor, nevermore. It will lure me away, nevermore. So it is a dark thing, saying that, get throwing off your shackles of pessimism and because Andy had that. He had that sort of terrible stage fright and often felt self-worth, which was ridiculous, really, because he's a genius. With sweets and shiny things, just like a magpie, she claims she's found a way to make her own light. Again, it could be about a relationship breaking. I know that Andy's marriage did have issues. So Collins, leaving, maybe, like finding your light under a bushel. But outside of the lyric, the music's really fun. And sometimes this song, again, it's one of those ones that I sort of don't hang around with a lot. But it's a really optimistic, and it does come up in the title, burning with optimism's flame. Again, not the most in-depth lyric, although it's a very wordy song. How he gets all those lyrics into such a small stanza is beyond me, but he does it, and he does it while they both do it with such aplomb, And then we move on from that one to you hear that? I pressed the music. Get myself in trouble. Turn it down. The reason you hear the music, I use Spotify for the lyric because it's the easiest way for me to get my hands on it all the time. Now this is Sergeant Rock. This is a single. Again, it did pretty well, but not as well as it could have done. It's a real throwback to when they were the Helium Kids. It's got a real 70s glam rock feel, the boys singing "Hey rock, rock, hey rock, rock," and it's got this, again, very gated, very angular, very modern drum sound with a lot of angular and interesting modern atonal guitars on it. And it's got one of my favorite songs on the album for its fun. I'm enlisting overseas aid. Never need assisting in help with a maid. Get the expert on mademoiselles. He could defuse any bombshell. If I could only be tough like him, then I could win my own small battle of the sexes. Oh, wonderful lyric. Sergeant Rock is going to help me make the girl keep her mind stood in line. Sergeant Rock is going to help me make the girl mine keep her stood in line. Dubious lyric to some extent. And make the girl mine, wave the victory sign. Sergeant Rock is going to help me. I'm invading territories, girls are foreign and strange to me. Get the expert at kissing and stuff. He says easy when things get rough. He stays easy when things get rough. If I could only be tough like him, then I could win my own small battle of the sexes. It is very much a teenage boy song, very much a 70s. You can imagine hearing that coming on after Bay City Rollers on Top of the Pops, or Slade or something like that. It is really a lovely kind of throwback to the awkwardness of love and having friends. We all had them friends that were much better with the ladies than you were. I know I did. I mean, often I'd go to a nightclub, which was not my place. I wasn't very comfortable. I'd go with mates, and they'd all leave with girls in their arms, and I'd be standing at the bus stop, getting my own way home on my own. And I'm not asking for sympathy, but that is just what it was. Some people were good with it, and some people weren't. And I was definitely in the category of not quite sure what I was doing, like a lot of us, right? Anyway, brilliant song, great pop song, great single, lovely use of the great gated drums. The choruses sing along and fun. And now this is the one. I remember I said right at the beginning, there's one song that really opened my eyes and said, wow, this is the heaviest song XTC has ever done. And I genuinely mean this. This song is called Travels in Nihilion. So Nihilon. Right? It's very dark. It steps away from the angularity, the snappy, pointed, sharp type overtones of the album, and it has this sort of doom-esque metal kind of saturated, cold sound, this sort of real depths of depression, real in the mind of both of Andy, particularly here. It's very deep. It's extremely unnerving, I found, to be honest with you. In my mindset at the moment, I found it very unnerving. I always found it a little bit off-putting, unsettling, but recently this really sort of dug into my dark soul a bit. You've learnt no lessons, all the time so cheaply spent. There's no youth culture, only masks. They let you rent. Travels and travels in the Hillian. We've seen no Jesus and come and gone. Fashion, their vampire drapes itself across your back. As you fall from style, it waits rebirth on its track. Travels in the Hillian. We've seen no Jesus come and gone. Building up your whimsy, hypnotizing you to need to dance, goes full circle, one step ahead of your greed. Travels in the Hillian. You've seen no Jesus come and gone. You've learnt no lessons. All those years you get it right. Flashes of promise burnt out faster than the strobe light. So it's really, again, it's a real deep introspection into his own self-worth, unfortunately, sadly speaking. He's obviously struggling with the belief of himself, which is a real sad thing. It's a lot of very gifted artists and thinkers are like that, not believing in their self-worth, and it's very sad. Now, Nihilian could be a Bible reference. I don't know. Those out there that might know, I mean, I could Google it and find out, I suppose, but I'll let you learn. I just assume it's a biblical term, like Fields of the Nephilim. I don't know. It's very dark. Musically, it's very dense and very spiritual, I find. Complete. I feel it's almost a complete opposite. There are moments in it that will be more angular, I think, but it's me. You'll take what you want from it. I take that from this, okay? And then we have a couple of tracks on here. Smokeless Zone is also boys have this tendency to write, particularly Andy, write about songs that are about they had, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they had happy upbringings, but I think they had bad personal lives after that. And a lot of it's often written about suburban family issues. And this one here is no different. I'm living in my smokeless zone. My house is not a happy home. I've got to do something before I kick the bucket. I clean my dusty window sills, but everything I grow it kills. I don't want to stay in this street any longer. I'm living in this smokeless zone. England's green, once so pleasant land. Living on a time bomb, yeah. The whole damn place is going to turn to sand. That's also about the industrialization of... I mean, they moved to London from Swindon to be famous, I think. And the industrialization of a big city, the dirtiness of it, the insignificance of the people that live there, the despair of particularly in the 80s, was a filthy place. London was a horrible place in the late 70s and early 80s. Absolute. Unless you were living in Knightsbridge or Hampstead, it was an absolute horrendous hole. And I remember it very, very well, and not pleasantly. Thatcher had come and destroyed the city and its population, and greed and money and all sorts of things. Anyway, he has a way of really sort of getting deep into that imagery, and he does it with such angularity. The drum, again, it's very fast, very frenetic. For the lyric, which is quite a dark lyric, which is, again, there's a lyric here: there's only one cure for an unhealthy body, get out of this smokeless zone. Because in London we had, because of the smog in the 50s, where people were dying because there was so much coal dust in the air, trapping fumes from the cars that couldn't get out. People were dying. They couldn't even leave their houses. In fact, it was seeping into their houses and killing people in their homes. They made smokeless zones where you couldn't burn coal or wood, which were meant to be healthier, weren't necessarily the case. It's very fast and frenetic. It's a lovely contradiction to the lyric in the music. And I think that's another beauty of this album. And then we get to Don't Lose Your Temper. Yeah, look, okay. I'll would it, it's not a song that I have a lot of overly good thoughts about, to be honest. I have to be honest when I'm talking about an album. And the reason I say that is because it's a brilliant song, don't get me wrong. It's frenetic, it's punky, it's very new wave, and I love it in that respect. But there they are trying to get away and be different, and yet they've slipped this in. And musically, not lyrically, musically, they've slipped it in, and it's very. It reminds me a lot of Go To, their second album, White Noise, their first album. There's something very basic and almost, I don't know, it's almost a throwback, which I think upsets me because I want the album to keep. When I listen to this album, I want their growth to keep growing, and they may have put it on there because that's what they like to play. They might put it on there because they want the fans to have something to listen to. It is quite alt pop punk sounding, and there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy it. I do. I just think again after the amazing previous two songs, you get to this and it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's a bit like Relief. I don't know. Anyway. And then we finish with the very last track on the album, which is The Somnambulist. Now, somnambulism is when someone falls asleep but is alive. It's like a living coma, and they occasionally wake. A bit like narcolepsy. Okay, this is very dark way to end an album. It's almost early form of ASMR, where it's whispered, because it's about the dream state. It's about the sleeping, floating dream state. If you've ever watched The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that's about a somnambulist. And I studied that for my, it was part of my degree, part of my arts degree. I did film studies as well. My film studies part was German cinema, 1919 to 1924, and expressionist cinema, and one of those movies was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and I know that movie very, very well, and it has that feel of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. You know, untie the gown, float to the ground, she revolves around and around, making no sound, air leaving slow, still breathing through, decaying through brown, diving, she's bound, because they're basically dying in their sleep almost, right? Treasures unfound, air leaving slow, still breathing though, somnambulist, somnambulist, somnambulist. It's a very simple lyric, but it's really a funny way to end the album. You know, all this frenetic pace, all this wonderful, intelligent, interesting turn of speed and mix of sound and lyrically contradicting to the music that it's attached to, and then we end with this really quite visual, film-esque kind of Jacques Tati kind of you know what I mean when I say Jacques Tati? I mean like kind of French, you know, noir cinema kind of feel. It floats away. It almost floats away, that you just end the album on this, not downer, but probably time to take a breath. I really love it. I absolutely genuinely love it. In the mood I'm in right now, probably not the greatest thing to listen to, but it is pretty beautiful. It is really, really beautiful. And how to end an album in such a way is I would have ended it on Travels in Nihilion myself, because I like to go and end it on a bang. But what a way to finish. Not a long track by any means, but beautiful. And you can even close your eyes and imagine this woman in thin, you know, diaphanous silk, lying on a mattress, you know, in a beautiful four-poster bed in black and white, you know, beautiful lighting, and it, you know, and it's sort of like you hear the crank of the 1920s camera cranking away as the actress lies there in all her corpse paint, and then the, you know, just being, and then the actor coming in, and you know, the love interest coming in and leaning over and waiting for her to wake, trying to wake her. Very, very Romeo and Juliet, very Snow White. It's beautiful. It really is a beautiful way to end the album, and that's a beautiful way to end this. So I have gone well over the hour, but I could not talk about every track on this album because it's beautiful, beautiful album. Anyway, I've chatted for too long. Please do go and listen to it. It's available on all streaming platforms. If you can hear the 2019 Stephen Wilson remastered remix, please do so. If not, any version of it will give you that sense of brilliance that this band is at their peak. This is their peak. A lot of people say that English Settlement is their peak. I don't think so. I think this is the point where they changed musical sound forever, and they managed to attach lyrics to music which shouldn't happen and it shouldn't be, and it just works, and it's just brilliantly intelligent, gloriously dark, wonderfully stark, and joyously poppy at the same time. A brilliant album, one of my all-time favourites, and so I hope you do listen to it and you give it a go, and then maybe you might dive into other albums. So there's like Oranges and Lemons, and that sort of, those brilliant albums that followed post the Black Sea album. And there's a lot of really, really good albums that did come out after that. Express is one of them. I'm trying to let me give you a rundown of their albums. All right, let's just do that. Hang on. Here we go. Skylarking, that's the one I got recently. English Settlement, Non-Such, which is a brilliant album. The Big Express, Mama, English Settlement, absolutely brilliant. Up until their last major album, there's a lot of albums they did after '92 which aren't available, which is a shame, on the streaming platforms. But you can still get them elsewhere cheaply on CD if you want to do so. But definitely White Music, not White Noise. White Music, Go To, Drums and Wires, Black Sea, English Settlement, Mama, The Big Express, Skylarking, Oranges and Lemons, Non-Such. Brilliant. Not one will let you down at all. And if you want, like me, an introduction to it when you're younger, get the 1996 compilation album Fossil Fuel, the XTC singles from 77 to 92. It's a great compilation. I have it on cassette, I've got it on CD, and I've got it on vinyl, and I love it in all its glories. Or you can get the compact XTC, which is just released on compact disc from 1986, which will give you most of their past albums. Anyway, enough for me. Next week we're going to go back to something really heavy, so I haven't left you behind these heavy people. This next album next week is going to be a little band I found while tootling through my review folder, and they blew my mind, so hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. Talk to you soon. See you then. Bye for now.